Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. I never liked crowds. Not after deployments. Too many exits to watch. Too many variables. Too many people with their own unpredictable reactions. But that night, I sat in the second row of the Lucas Theatre for the Arts in downtown Savannah, Georgia, because my daughter had begged me to be there. She was 10, and it was her first real recital outside of the school gym circuit. We'd driven up from Hinesville after a long week, and I still had that stiffness in my legs from an old back injury, but none of it mattered. She was on stage, in pink tights and a hand-sewn costume, spinning to Tchaikovsky like the whole world hadn't started unraveling just outside the double doors. It was a warm evening, March, early spring, but already sticky with southern heat. I had on a simple grey polo and jeans. Retired or not, I still moved like I expected something to go wrong. You don't spend 2 decades in special forces and just turn that off. My Glock 19 stayed under my belt in a custom holster at 4 o'clock. Nobody checked bags at a kid's ballet performance. The audience was what you'd expect. Parents glued to their phones until their own kid took the stage. Grandparents whispering about posture, toddlers squirming. Nothing looked out of place. The lobby had been packed with flowers and photo booths. No warnings, no noise from the outside world. That changed about 45 minutes in. The theatre manager stepped onto the edge of the stage mid-performance. No microphone, just whispered something to the stage crew, then disappeared backstage. I didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe an injury or technical glitch. But I saw him again less than 2 minutes later, this time red in the face and gesturing sharply toward the side doors. People started murmuring. Parents glanced around. The dancers froze mid-routine when the house lights came up halfway. A woman behind me muttered something about an accident on Broughton Street. Another said she thought she heard sirens. Lots of them, but not close. No announcement came. The curtain never fell. And then someone screamed. Not from the stage. From the lobby, a muffled yell, sharp, panicked, followed by a crash. The kind of crash that tells you something broke, something big. The double doors to the left of the stage slammed open. A woman burst in, staggering, dress torn, one shoe missing. Blood on her blouse. She didn't look back, just ran straight down the aisle, past me, toward the main exit, screaming for her daughter. And then came the second figure, male, moving strangely, like his joints were loose, like he didn't understand what his body was supposed to do. People thought it was some kind of act, a skit, a dramatic anti-bullying campaign, or mental health awareness stunt. But I stood up before most others had even processed it, because I saw his hands, blood under the nails, skin missing along the right forearm, and his eyes. They didn't track the woman as a person. They tracked her like movement, like a sensor picking up heat. The man behind me stood and said something dumb. "This isn't funny," or "Call the cops." But I was already moving. My daughter was still backstage. She'd just finished her number before the interruption. I turned and headed straight for the side doors. The screams hadn't stopped. If anything, they were multiplying. The man on stage lunged into the crowd, and that's when the panic began. Seats scraped against the floor as people surged to their feet. Someone jumped the orchestra pit. The figure on stage didn't move quickly, but he didn't stop. Just walked into the crowd, arms out, reaching, grasping. The woman who tripped over the edge of the stage was the first to go down. I didn't look back. I reached the wings and pushed through the curtains, yelling for Kaylee. The green room was chaos. Little girls crying, one of the older girls in a bun and smeared makeup trying to calm them. I found Kaylee in the corner, hugging her knees, still in costume. "Time to go, sweetheart." She looked up, confused. "What about Mom? She's supposed to..." "She'll meet us outside. Right now. We move." I picked her up without a word and pushed through the emergency exit. No alarm sounded. Another sign that things were breaking down. The alley out back reeked of trash and something metallic. Distant sounds echoed off the brick walls, glass shattering, a car horn stuck blaring, footsteps too fast and too many. We headed toward the parking structure 2 blocks west. My truck was on the second level, A 2008 F250 diesel, lifted, with 35s on it. She's not subtle, but she'll clear a curb and roll through a median if she has to. I cut through Ellis Square, and that's when I saw the first cluster. 5 or 6 of them, standing still, not talking, just existing. Limbs slack, eyes wandering. One leaned against the fountain, his jaw moving like he'd forgotten what to do with it. Another sniffed the air. We went wide. Kaylee clung to my neck. I told her not to speak, not even a whisper. She did what ballerinas do, held perfectly still, like this was a stage cue, and she knew better than to break it. At the parking deck entrance, the gate arm was down, unattended. The booth was empty. Blood smeared the side window, a trail leading out and down into the sidewalk gutter. A woman's purse lay open, its contents spilled across the concrete like a dissected memory. Makeup, receipts, pacifier, lipstick. We climbed the stairwell instead of taking the ramp. Fewer sightlines, tighter angles. I moved fast but deliberate. Didn't speak, didn't breathe through my mouth. On level 2, I peered through the window slit. A figure stood by my truck. Older man, suit jacket torn at the elbow, blood on his collar. Not moving, not looking around, just waiting. I watched for a full 30 seconds before opening the stairwell door. He didn't turn. I walked wide around the truck, put Kaylee in the back seat, and shut the door. Quietly, the keys were in my jacket. When I climbed in, I locked the doors and started the engine. Diesel rumble echoed off the concrete. The man still hadn't moved, until I touched the shifter. Then he turned. His mouth opened, slack and expressionless. He stumbled once, then moved faster than I expected. I gunned it, rolled straight through the arm barrier, tires squealing. Out on Montgomery Street, the whole block had changed. Crowds were fleeing the Civic Center. A sedan had crashed into a light pole near Liberty. People screamed from a rooftop bar, tossing chairs down as if they could ward off what was chasing them. I didn't wait. We drove south, cutting toward Habersham. I kept us off the main roads, using side streets I knew from when I did contracting work back in 2014. The further we got from downtown, the quieter it became. But not safer. Not yet. Kaylee asked only once, "Are we going to see Mum?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know. The phone had stopped working. No signal, no data. The emergency channels were silent. FM radio played nothing but static. AM gave me a single voice in Spanish, distant and fuzzy. I pulled into a small Baptist church parking lot just off Skidaway Road. Big oaks hung low over the lot. It felt covered, quiet. I parked behind the building, blacked out the windows with an old wool blanket I kept in the back, and finally let myself speak. "We're gonna stay here for a bit." Kaylee nodded. "Like hide and seek?" Exactly like that. We stayed silent for an hour, ate some old peanut butter crackers and half a juice box from the glove compartment. I stripped her out of the costume and into a hoodie and jeans from her dance bag. At least she'd packed it like I told her, like we were always ready to leave fast. Not because we expected this, but because I've seen how slow things can break and how fast they can fall. That difference between tension and collapse is just one missed radio call or one lie held too long. That's all it ever takes. The church lot stayed quiet except for the creaking of trees in the warm evening breeze. A few squirrels darted through brush beside the fence. Somewhere out back, an old AC unit kicked on and off. Savannah was like that. Too many small noises masking what mattered. I kept the engine off and scanned the road with a monocular every 10 minutes. We were boxed in by low brick walls and azaleas. Good sightlines, but tight escape if something went wrong. I knew it wouldn't hold long. No place would. Kaylee fell asleep with her head on my thigh in the back seat. I didn't sleep. Not even for a minute. I cleaned and checked the Glock, then pulled the Henry lever action 4570 from the floor rack. I'd used it for hog hunting back in Liberty County. Short-barreled, ghost ring sights, side-loading gate. It wasn't tactical, but it was reliable, and it hit hard. I loaded 5 rounds of soft point and kept it within reach. It wasn't about fire rate now. It was about what punched through and dropped what needed dropping. Around 9:20 p.m., I heard them. First, soft footfalls near the front of the building, too slow and uneven for a deer or stray dog. Then something knocked against a trash can, not a curious rattle, more like someone brushing it with their hip while stumbling. I nudged Kaylee gently and brought a finger to my lips. She blinked up at me, confused, but quiet. I whispered into her ear, just low enough. "Stay still. Do not move, no matter what you hear." I cracked the rear passenger door and slipped out into the warm night, boots barely touching the gravel. The Henry stayed low, close to my chest. I circled the lot's edge in a low crouch, pausing at the northeast corner of the building near the overgrown hedges. That's when I saw them. 3 figures moving along the church's front walk. No flashlights, no speech, just stumbling shapes dragging feet on concrete, bumping into the handrail and each other. All 3 were adults, one in a bright yellow shirt torn at the shoulder, another in what looked like medical scrubs, the fabric torn high across the back like something had clawed or chewed through it. The third was barefoot and jittery, limbs stiff but purposeful. Their skin looked wrong. Not dead grey like a movie, but pale and washed out, streaked with grime and flecks of dried blood. Their eyes didn't glow or shimmer, but they didn't blink either, just locked on anything that moved. They weren't fast, but they weren't distracted either. I backed up to the truck and opened the passenger door just wide enough to whisper to Kaylee, "Keep your head down and hands over your ears." She didn't argue. That's what told me she was scared. I rounded the truck and waited behind the tailgate until the figures came into full view, stepping clear into the open lot. One of them made a dry, wheezing sound like a breath trying to leave without muscles behind it. I didn't hesitate. I took aim center mass and fired. The first round hit the man in scrubs square in the sternum. He jolted but didn't fall. The second dropped him backward. I cycled the action and pivoted on my stance. Fired again, this time high on the chest. The woman in the yellow shirt dropped instantly, folding like a marionette with her strings cut. The last one turned toward the sound, eyes unfocused but intent. I didn't wait for it to get closer. The 4th round struck low in the throat and the 5th just below the nose. They weren't hard to kill, but they didn't act like people. That was the worst part. No screaming, no running, just a slow march toward any sign of life, like wind-up toys wound too far and set loose in the dark. I reloaded quickly and checked the bodies. No pulse, no twitch. The heads were misshapen where the final shots landed. One had chewed off fingertips and broken front teeth. Whatever they'd been, they weren't anymore. I dragged the corpses to the edge of the lot and covered them with an old plastic tarp I found beside the HVAC unit. Not to hide them, but to spare Kaylee the sight. When I climbed back into the truck, she asked only one question. "Were those the sick people?" I nodded. She curled back into the seat and didn't say anything else. We drove through the night. I avoided highways and major intersections, sticking to county roads and back routes through Richmond Hill and up toward the Ogeechee River. I knew those paths from years back, quiet, isolated, and full of deer blinds and hog traps. If we had to, we could hole up in a feeder shack or ditch. I kept the lights off and less turning. Kaylee dozed off again sometime around midnight, mouth slightly open, curled beneath her jacket. We reached a roadside produce stand I knew, long abandoned, half collapsed, but sheltered from the wind. I parked behind it and built a soft lean-to using 2 weather tarps and some cordage from the kit bag. We slept for 3 hours, wrapped in blankets and tension. I didn't risk a fire, not even a candle, just the moonlight and the sound of cicadas. At first light, I checked our position and ranged to the next gas stop. I had 3/4 of a tank, but diesel would become scarce fast. I hadn't seen another vehicle moving since Savannah. Roads were littered with abandoned cars and debris. No signs, no flashing lights, no uniformed responders. Just stillness, like a city that had been wrapped in gauze and left behind. I tuned the emergency band on the Midland CB again. Still nothing. No NOAA tones, no voice transmissions. Just dead air. The silence wasn't peace. It was void. Mid-morning, we pushed through the small town of Guyton. Most of the storefronts were dark, some windows broken, but no immediate movement. I parked near a hardware store and went in armed. Found a bolt cutter, fuel stabilizer, a pry bar, and a box of heavy contractor bags. I also found a clerk in the back room who'd clearly turned a day or two earlier. His legs were broken, maybe from a fall, but he was still alive, or something like it. He lay still until I got too close, then tried to lunge, mouth open, fingers clawing at the linoleum. I shot him once, center forehead. It wasn't about cruelty, it was about control. I sanitized the gloves and returned to the truck. Kaylee never asked what I found. We kept going. Somewhere between Egypt and Oliver, we found a roadside diner that had been overrun. Tables turned, plates shattered, blood smeared across menus like brushstrokes. There was food in the freezer, unspoiled, and bottles of water still in the crate behind the counter. I bagged what I could, didn't touch the upstairs. There were sounds behind that door, thumps, scratches, one long moan. I didn't go looking for ghosts. Outside, the day was warm, humid. Bugs hovered in thick clouds over the ditch grass. The land stretched flat in every direction. It should have felt peaceful, but it didn't. It felt hollow. That afternoon, we stopped under a railroad overpass to rest and organize supplies. I emptied the go bag, sorted ammo, loaded the last of the snacks into an old tackle box for easier access. Kaylee helped without complaint. She didn't ask to use my phone or watch cartoons. She didn't say she was bored or hungry. She didn't cry. There was a quiet that hung between us. Not silence, just absence of normal questions, of the way kids normally fidget. She folded gear like she was prepping for a trip we'd always planned. Not fleeing something no one could explain, she wiped down her water bottle with a rag I handed her and asked if she should throw away the cracker wrappers. I told her to keep them. Fire starter. She nodded. We kept the truck idling in case we needed to move fast. I had already removed the cab lights and disabled the dome bulbs the night before. No glow when the doors opened. Dull black duct tape over reflective surfaces. Every inch I could control I did. The infected weren't fast, but they weren't blind either. By dusk, we were moving again. We headed north by west, through Rincon and toward Springfield. The towns blurred together. Same shuttered gas stations, same broken windows, same slow-moving figures on the shoulders of the road, never clustered in large groups but always too close to ignore. I learned to spot them by posture, heads low, feet slightly apart, arms hanging unevenly, like meat off a butcher's hook. They didn't sway unless wind caught them, and they didn't speak, not even to each other. Springfield had a church I remembered from years ago. First Methodist, tall white cross, gravel lot with a metal swing set rusted into the weeds. It sat on high ground, flanked by scrub pines and old farm fencing. We pulled in just after sunset and parked around back, where the grass was patchy and tall. I walked the perimeter twice. No movement, no fresh tracks. The lock on the back door had been cut at some point, but it hung closed. Inside, it was still. Old hymnals scattered across pews, a pulpit knocked sideways, some furniture broken, but not recent. No bodies, just silence and dust. We slept in the pastor's office, an old paneled room with a broken lamp and a faded calendar still pinned to the corkboard. March 2025, a red circle around the 14th, Elder Potluck. It never happened. I wedged a chair under the doorknob and leaned the Henry next to the filing cabinet. Kaylee curled on the couch under my jacket and fell asleep in minutes. I took first watch. Around midnight, I heard movement outside. Not voices, not footsteps on gravel. Something softer, shuffling, intermittent, like shoes on wet leaves. I left Kaylee inside and crept to the side window, peering through a crack in the blinds. 6 of them stood near the swing set. Not clustered, just there, staring in different directions. One leaned against the old jungle gym. Another swayed slightly with the wind. They hadn't followed us. They weren't hunting. They just arrived. I stayed frozen at that window for 20 full minutes, watching their stillness. They didn't move toward the building, didn't seem to respond to anything around them, just lingered, as if something in their mind, or whatever was left of it, told them to be there. Eventually, I crept back to the office and shut the door. I didn't tell Kaylee in the morning. No reason to make her carry something she didn't see. We moved out early, sticking to the rural roads through Clio, and then cutting northwest, aiming for the South Carolina border. There'd been a National Guard armory near Garnett, small, but real. I didn't think it would be active, but I knew it had perimeter fencing and probably an old stockpile. If nobody was there, it might still be a place to regroup and figure out the next step. By noon, we crossed into Jasper County. The border sign was gone. Only the bent posts remained. Most gas stations we passed were empty, already looted. Some shelves torn apart. Some just abandoned with the lights still on, buzzing like nothing had changed. I found a propane stove in one, untouched, and a box of instant grits that looked older than me. Near Tillman, we saw our first convoy, or what was left of it. There were 3 Humvees. One was flipped, the other 2 burned out. You could still see scorched skeletons inside. Spent brass littered the pavement. The 50 cal mount on the lead vehicle was twisted and empty. One of the side panels still had the unit stenciled on it. 118th Field Artillery Battalion, Georgia National Guard, out of Savannah. They'd probably been trying to hold I-95 or get civilians moving north. Judging by the shell casings and the blood, it hadn't ended well. Kaylee stayed in the truck while I searched. The bodies were beyond identification, burned, torn, some half devoured. I found 2 MREs and a crushed radio still blinking a faint red light. No signal, not even static, just a pulse light that said it hadn't found anything worth answering. I pocketed a sidearm from one of the dead, an M17, half melted, still had a round chambered, and returned to the cab without saying much. She asked if they were soldiers. I nodded. She looked out the windshield for a while and then turned away. We stopped that evening outside an abandoned roadside motel called the Pine Haven Inn, sign hanging by one chain, windows shattered, the doors all open like mouths waiting to swallow someone dumb enough to step inside. I didn't plan to sleep there, but the lot was empty, and I needed rest. So I did something I'd told myself I wouldn't. I set traps, a line of fishing hooks tied with nylon filament across the base of the stairwell, noisemaker cans tied to window latches. Nothing lethal, just enough to warn me. We slept in the laundry room, only one entrance. I stacked the door with a washer and kept Kaylee tucked into the corner on a foam pad. The air smelled like mildew and bleach. I stayed awake long enough to memorize every sound: dripping pipes, distant rustle of trash in the breeze, a broken neon light flickering on and off across the road. At 3:14 a.m., one of the cans outside rattled. I sat up instantly. No sound after that. Just one shake. I kept my eyes on the door and waited. I didn't wake Kaylee. Nothing followed. No push at the door. No scrape. Just that one sound. I stayed awake until dawn. When I finally stepped outside to check, the trap was still in place. But across the lot, near the pool fence, a single red smear trailed down the sidewalk. No body, no footprints, just blood, dried and flaking like rust. We didn't stay. That day, we moved north again, off pavement. I took farm roads and dirt tracks, trusting GPS less and my own bearings more. I knew these woods from my training days, long before I retired. There were fish camps and feed stations, deer stands hidden in the pine rows. I aimed for those places, anywhere not meant for crowds. Mid-afternoon, the sky turned grey. A storm rolled in fast, thick with thunder and low clouds. We sheltered inside an old hunting shack just past Crooked Hill. It had a busted padlock and a broken window, but was dry and mostly intact. Inside, there were some old paper targets, a busted camping chair, and a half-empty cooler full of mold. I boarded the window with scavenged shelving and set up our blankets on the plywood floor. The rain hit hard, pounding like hammers on a tin roof. It muffled all outside sound. It could have been 100 of them walking past and we wouldn't have heard a thing. We ate in silence. Canned meat, some peanuts, and water from a jug I filtered through a life straw I'd carried since Afghanistan. Kaylee stayed close. She didn't play, didn't draw, just sat, watching the wall as if waiting for it to peel back and show something worse than we'd already seen. After we finished, I folded the blankets, repacked the tackle box, and restocked our gear into the truck. I ran diagnostics on the diesel, checked the oil and belts, and made sure the suspension hadn't taken damage from the off-road push the day before. I kept busy not just to stay ready, but to stop thinking too hard, because I was hanging everything now on the one place that might still mean safety, her parents' house. Back before the world bent sideways, we'd talked about it as a bug-out location. Her father was old-school Army Signal Corps, the kind of man who kept printed topo maps and ham antennas long after most people turned to smartphones and weather apps. Her mother was no slouch either, retired trauma nurse, sharp as a scalpel, always had 3 months of freeze-dried food in plastic bins under the stairs. They lived in a hard-to-reach part of rural South Carolina, 10 miles outside of Blackville, on a dirt road that dead-ended near an old timber plot. It wasn't perfect, but it was far from everything else. That was the point. We started north just after dawn. The sky was clear again, and the roads were bone dry. Every town we passed felt more deserted than the last, not emptied in panic, but vacuumed of life. No cars idling, no dogs barking, no crows on power lines, just empty windows and unmoving curtains, like the places were watching us but had nothing left to say. In Cope, we saw a flipped tractor trailer on the rail crossing. The trailer was cracked open, its load, pallets of bottled soda, scattered across the gravel. No sign of the driver. A nearby sedan had all its doors open and a child's seat left behind, but nothing inside. Just broken glass and silence. Kaylee didn't ask me what had happened. She was past needing explanations. I drove slow, cutting through back roads most wouldn't know even with a GPS. The last half hour was all pine and brush, nothing but dirt and cracked asphalt patches, winding turns through swampy undergrowth. I knew the road by memory. The gate came into view just after 10 a.m. A metal livestock fence, wired shut with a chain and painted black. The hand-painted mailbox still read, R. Brunner, in sun-bleached block letters. But the real sign was the gate itself. It had been clipped. The chain snipped and coiled on the ground like a dead snake. I stopped the truck 100 feet back and turned off the engine. Left Kaylee inside with the doors locked and the Henry beside her. Told her to watch and wait. She didn't argue. That was the other thing. She'd stopped questioning the rules. I moved on foot the rest of the way, M17 drawn, steps careful. The gravel drive was chewed up as, muddy in spots from yesterday's storm, but still showed faint tire tracks. Narrow, shallow. Not my truck's. Something smaller, probably front-wheel drive, civilian vehicle, fresh within the last 24 hours. The house came into view through the trees. 2-story brick with a tin roof, screened porch, and a propane tank half sunken in the wet clay off to the side. One upstairs window had a blanket nailed over it. The front door was half open, not broken, just hanging like someone had left in a hurry. The screen door was split at the corner. I swept the perimeter before going in. No bodies, no tracks leading away, a broken rake in the backyard. The garden fence knocked over. The chicken coop door was swinging, empty inside. Something had gone wrong, but not in the way we'd been seeing. This wasn't an attack. This was flight. Inside, the house was in disarray. Couch cushions pulled. The emergency food shelf in the pantry half emptied. Closet doors ajar. A spilled bottle of iodine in the sink. I found an old AR-15 in the master bedroom, upper missing, bolt carrier stripped, tools still on the workbench. The safe was open, ammo gone. They had left. Deliberately. Organized. Fast. That meant they'd seen something coming. In the back room, the one her father had converted into a home Radio Shack, I found what I was looking for. A weatherproof Pelican case locked to the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet. I punched in the code, her birthday, the same as always, and lifted the lid. Inside was the satellite phone. Old model, but rugged and field-ready. I booted it, extended the antenna, and waited for acquisition. After 45 seconds, the signal bar hit 3, enough to make contact. I sat at the desk, pulled the laminated frequency card from the drawer, and keyed in the number I'd memorized years ago. It was a long-range contact number, direct to the command rotation line for ADA Eastern Command. I didn't expect it to go through, but it did. 3 rings, a click, and then a familiar voice. Sharp and professional, but barely hiding a rush of breath beneath the surface. "This is Echo Command. Identify." "Juno 1, I said, requesting signal confirm and relay. Responding party is Hart, Mitch Hart, retired US Army, requesting connection to Major Abigail Hart. Immediate family. This is urgent. There was a pause, static, then, stand by. A minute passed, then another. I kept my eyes on the porch, watching the tree line. Then came her voice. Tired, firm, unmistakable. Mitch. I closed my eyes, not out of relief, out of compression. Every muscle in my back had been coiled for days. Hearing her didn't fix anything, but it proved something. She was alive. She was still in it. You all right? I asked. I'm in one of the regional coordination bunkers outside Richmond. Communications are limited. Half our uplinks are down. We've got scattered teams in the field trying to re-establish zones of control. No cities are holding. Not for long. Charleston's gone. So is Raleigh. Atlanta's fractured. We lost Savannah. I know, she exhaled. Kaylee, with me. She's good, quiet, still herself mostly. We made it to your parents' place. They're gone. I know. Dad called in 3 days ago. Said something breached the gas station on Route 78. They thought it was random until they saw it walking. Packed up and headed north to the hunting lodge near Jones Gap. Last signal I got was short, maybe 30 seconds. Said they'd try to reach the FM repeater site if the phone died. Repeaters are probably down. They said they had supplies for 2 weeks, if they made it. I leaned forward on the desk, watching dust float in the shaft of morning light. Is it airborne? No confirmation. Doesn't behave like any pathogen we've modeled. Doesn't replicate through fluid or particulate the way we expect. It behaves more like a neurological override. Takes basic motor functions, shuts down pain response, suppresses higher reasoning. The dead don't get back up. But the infected, they degrade, lose muscle cohesion, speed drops over time, but they stay mobile longer than any known system can support. Mitch, this isn't viral, it's designed. She didn't say anything. That silence was answer enough. I let that sit, then asked, what do you need from us? If you can make it to the fallback corridor near Fort Mill, we've got a narrow window to screen and stabilize. We're moving survivors through low-density zones, quiet roads only, no radios, no lights, no noise. We'll relay coordinates in 8 hours. Wait for the next signal window. I'll patch it through this channel. I looked at the map on the wall, her father's old laminated road atlas with every secondary and tertiary route highlighted in yellow ink. No interstates, no state routes, just forgotten trails through farmland and marsh. I'll get her there, I said. She hesitated. I don't know what it'll look like by the time you arrive, but we'll be watching for your signal. Understood. The line crackled. Then, I love you. I know. Keep your head down. She hung up. I sat there for a moment longer, listening to the digital silence. Then I shut the phone off, repacked it, and secured it in the glove box. When I stepped back outside, Kaylee was sitting in the bed of the truck, legs crossed, staring at the trees. She looked up and said, "Is Mum okay?" I nodded. She is, and she's waiting for us. Where do we go? North, through the back roads, quiet and slow. It's gonna take a few days, but there's a plan. Kaylee nodded and stood. No smile, just understanding. We moved back into the house and stripped what we could. Blankets, fuel cans, a second trauma kit, and some hand tools. I found her mother's old revolver in the bedside drawer. Kaylee recognized it. Didn't say anything. That night, we didn't stay in the house. We parked a quarter-mile up the road and camped in the brush, just beneath the edge of a dry creek bed, because if someone else found the house next, I didn't want us inside it. I'd slept in worse places, dug into ditches with a poncho liner and mosquitoes thick enough to block out the moon. This wasn't much different. I rigged a tarp over the truck bed with some broken pine limbs, pressed down brush over the windshield to kill reflections, and laid out the thermal blanket underneath us. I took the first watch, as always, and didn't close my eyes until the sun was creeping through the woods. By then, the crows had started again. Just one or two, but it meant something had stirred them. We rolled out at 7 a.m. No hot breakfast, just dried fruit and an energy bar I split between us. Kaylee didn't complain. She just sat in the cab, hands tucked under her thighs, and watched the forest line. Her face was calm, but I knew she was watching for movement. She didn't ask about cartoons anymore, didn't hum songs. Her posture had changed. More alert, more still. It wasn't the kind of change you welcome in a 10-year-old, but I couldn't take it back. Our next goal was the corridor her mother had mentioned, the fallback path threading toward Fort Mill. I didn't expect a welcome wagon, but I trusted her to have left some trail markers. Abigail wasn't one to trust protocols she didn't write herself. If she said there was a window, there was. The problem was getting there. We cut northwest, avoiding every main artery. No GPS, no cell phone, just paper maps, old hunting guides, and backwater knowledge from drills I'd run in Carolina summers before I retired. We passed through the remains of Blackville by late morning. It was a hollow shell of a town now, a few cars in ditches, one half-charred trailer with the front door hanging open and the smell of old smoke and oil still clinging to the air. A hardware store had its windows smashed in, but hadn't been picked clean. I found 2 spools of paracord, a flint striker, and a bottle of camp soap. Kaylee stayed in the truck again. We'd stopped explaining that part to each other. It was just understood now. She stays inside unless I say otherwise. By mid-afternoon, we reached a long patch of dirt road that hadn't seen traffic in a week. Deep ruts from rain runoff. Old tire tracks washed out by time. I kept it slow, the diesel idling just high enough to keep momentum. The tree cover here was tighter, tunnel-like. Spanish moss hung from the branches like old bandages. I checked every side road, every driveway. Most homes were empty. One had a dog skeleton on the porch still leashed to the railing. Another had a weather-warped flag still waving, colors bleached pale by sun and heat. No movement, no smoke, no sound but the breeze pushing through the leaves. That night, we took shelter in an old irrigation pump shed set back off a soy field. I swept it for rodents, found a dry spot, and set a trip line at the door using a soda can and stones. Crude, but it had rattled loud enough to wake me. We shared jerky and crackers and ate in silence. Kaylee fell asleep against the wall, curled up with my jacket rolled under her head. I stayed awake until near midnight, trying to catch the satellite window on the iridium. No signal that night. Cloud cover was thick. On the 3rd day, we encountered the first real obstacle. A washed-out section of gravel road outside McCormick County. The creek it crossed had swelled from the last storm and carried off the culvert and part of the shoulder. The gap was only 15 feet, but the mud was soft on both sides, and the ditch ran deeper than it looked. I spent an hour walking the area, marking the softest points, checking the angles. Ended up stacking 2 logs and packing stone and dirt on the upstream side to wedge a temporary ramp. Then I backed up, got the angle just right, and gave it one hard pass in low gear. The rear tires hit the far bank with a jolt that rocked Kaylee forward, but we made it across. I pulled 30 yards into the tree line and shut the truck off to check for damage. Just mud, no axle hits, no leaks. Kaylee gave me a half nod from the passenger seat. That was her new version of a smile. That afternoon we encountered a family on the side of the road. A man, a woman, and 2 kids, boy and girl, maybe 5 or 6, were standing beside a beat-up old sedan with a flat tire and the trunk wide open. The hood was propped with a stick, like someone had tried to fix something and gave up halfway. The man was waving a white t-shirt over his head, standing out in the open like he wanted to be seen. I didn't stop right away. I drove another 100 feet past and parked at an angle with good sight lines, engine still running. I told Kaylee to stay put, then stepped out with my weapon visible but pointed low. The woman held up a piece of torn cardboard with shaky letters in black marker. No sick need food. Her face was sunburned and drawn, hair tied back with a shoestring. The kid stood close to her legs, silent, eyes tracking everything. The man kept his hands up where I could see them. No sudden moves. I respected that. They didn't look infected, just worn down. Probably had been sleeping in that car for days. I tossed them a gallon of water from the bed and a pack of saltines wrapped in a plastic bag. "It's not much," I said, "but it'll help." The man caught it, nodded quickly. "Thank you," he said. "We're trying to get north. The car's shot, no spare. You headed to Fort Mill?" "Yeah," I said. quiet way. He glanced at the kids. Any chance you've got room? I looked back toward my truck. Kaylee's eyes were watching me from the passenger window. I wish I did, I said, but there's no space, and I can't risk getting slowed down. He nodded like he already knew the answer, but needed to ask anyway. You're the first we've seen in 2 days. You're not far behind a group, I told him. 8 or so, armed, took a white van, heading the same direction. He perked up a little. Any uniforms? No, but they moved like they knew what they were doing. Might be worth trailing them from a distance. Just keep to the tree line. He didn't say anything else, just looked down at his kids, then back at me. Thanks again, he said, for what you gave us. I stepped back, turned to leave, but then remembered the half-dead pistol I'd found earlier in a burned-out truck. I hadn't bothered logging it. Half the polymer frame had bubbled from heat, but it would still fire. I pulled it from the truck's door pocket and walked it back, holding it by the barrel. Here, I said, and tossed it gently, underhand. He caught it, surprised. No mag, no round-chambered. Found it near a fuel depot. It cycles. Barely. He looked at me, confused. Ammo? I'm gonna leave a small box on the road 100 feet past your car. Once I'm gone, it's yours. Don't move until I'm out of sight. He nodded slowly. Why help? Because someone helped me once, I said. Didn't stick around for thanks either. He didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at the gun in his hand, then back at me. Thanks again, he said finally, quieter this time, for what you gave us. I turned, walked back to the truck, and got in. Kaylee hadn't looked away the whole time. I didn't say anything, just drove forward, slow and steady, and when we passed a mile marker down the road, I pulled off into the ditch and set the ammo box down beside a fallen signpost. 32 rounds in a sealed sandwich bag. I didn't look back. They'd either make it or they wouldn't, but now they had a better shot, and that was the most anyone could ask for. We drove through Johnston late that evening. Still had a few signs of habitation. Laundry strung between windows, a fire pit burning low behind a diner, but no one showed themselves. I kept us rolling. I didn't want to play neighborhood ambassador. We camped that night in the back lot of a burned-down post office. I parked between 2 rusting dumpsters, rigged blackout covers, and wrapped Kaylee's blanket tighter than usual. The wind had picked up, and the nights were colder now. Not freezing, but enough to chill bone if you weren't moving. I watched the stars again. Orion, the Dippers. They looked the same as before, but they didn't feel the same. They felt like something left behind. That night, I woke to sound. Not close, not immediate, but there, scraping, metal on concrete. I held my breath and sat still, counting the spaces between. Then a knock, sharp once, against a steel surface. Not a fist, something harder, bone maybe. I waited 5 minutes before moving. Then I rolled from the cab and low-crawled to the corner of the dumpster to check. There were 2 of them, maybe 3. Hard to tell in the dark. They weren't charging, just drifting, like moths toward heat. One was missing a hand. Another wore a green work shirt so soaked in dried blood it looked like rusted leather. They moved slow, directionless, but they didn't leave. We stayed in the truck until dawn, unmoving. By light, they were gone. We resumed driving shortly after, passed over into the outer ring of Fort Mill's southern perimeter by early afternoon. No checkpoints, no barricades, just signs that someone had once tried. A pile of burned tires, a steel barrel marked, "Stop check for sick" in black spray paint. It was empty now. We took an old maintenance access road through the woods behind a municipal water facility. According to the last coordinates I'd gotten from Abigail, there was a rally point somewhere northwest of the Catawba River. She didn't say what it looked like, just a grid and a window. We reached the rise overlooking the river bend near sunset. The forest here was thicker, pines packed shoulder to shoulder. Visibility dropped to 20 feet in spots. I parked the truck in a natural cutout and camouflaged it with a tarp and brush netting. We moved on foot the last half mile. At 7 p.m. I found the marker, A torn scrap of IR reflective tape, barely visible in daylight, tied to a stripped cedar post and bent forward. It wasn't a signal to stop, it was a guidepost. I followed its angle toward a narrow trail, nearly invisible from the road, that ran between two creek beds. And there, dug into the side of a ridge under 3 layers of camo net and brush, was the bunker entrance. Fresh prints in the mud, old vehicle tracks. No lights, no smoke. I knelt, scanned with the monocular, and tapped twice on the stone outcropping as instructed. Low, soft, deliberate. A voice, quiet but firm, answered from behind a false rock. Identify. Hart, Mitch, retired SFG, with minor, requesting entry, cleared through echo command. 30 seconds passed. Then the stone shifted, and a figure in digital camo stepped forward, M4 leveled but not aimed. She wore a patch I hadn't seen in years. Expeditionary Sustainment Command. Her face was hard, eyes sunken, but she nodded. Come inside. You're late. Never said I'd be early. She didn't smile at the joke, just stepped back and let us pass through the cut in the hillside. The opening was narrow, framed with earth-packed concrete, and a triple reinforced hatch with hydraulic pistons left exposed and smeared with dried mud. A coil of razor wire lay coiled just inside, pulled back like a snake mid-strike. No lights, no sound, only the cold of the interior bleeding out into the humid dusk. I told Kaylee to stay close and took her hand in mine. Inside, the tunnel dropped 15 feet straight ahead, then curved hard left. The walls were steel reinforced, lined with stripped power conduits and patchwork welds. The air was stale but dry, with that faint metallic tang of too many people breathing recycled oxygen for too long. The only sound was the faint whine of an inverter running somewhere deep underground. We passed 2 more checkpoints, both guarded, both quiet. One of the men had blood on his boots. Not fresh, but not old either. I didn't ask. The woman who'd greeted us remained ahead, never once looking back. At the 3rd steel door, she stopped and knocked twice. Then again. Then once. The pattern of entry, an old fallback from blackout operations. The door slid open, revealing a room not much bigger than a garage workshop. A command table in the center, flat screen monitors above it. A battered whiteboard covered in red grease pencil. The lights overhead were low-powered LEDs, humming softly. A map of the southeast was pinned to one wall, not digital, paper, hand-annotated, marked with thick X's and red circles in every major population center. Charleston, Atlanta, Columbia, Charlotte, all marked the same way. Lost. And standing at the table was Abigail. She didn't run to me, didn't cry or collapse or shake. That wasn't who she was. She looked up, scanned Kaylee from head to toe, and then nodded once. Curt. Final. Like the silent release of breath she hadn't allowed herself until that moment. Then she walked forward and hugged our daughter tight against her chest. Kaylee didn't move for a full 10 seconds. Then her arms wrapped around her mother, and she finally cried. Not loud or wild, but that quiet release of held-in pressure, the sound of someone who'd waited too long to feel safe. Abigail looked at me over her shoulder. You brought her here alive. That's all that matters. No, I said. Now we figure out how to keep her that way. She stepped back and motioned for us to follow. Come with me. We're low on time, and there's more you need to see. The interior of the bunker ran deep, deeper than I expected. Originally, I'd assumed it was an old water utility or maintenance depot, but this went beyond that. 4 levels at least. The corridors were reinforced with welded rebar and filled with supply pallets, comms gear, solar inverters, a makeshift hydroponic system rigged along the southern wall to grow nutrient greens in reused plastic bins. Most of the living space was communal. No privacy, no excess. 20 or 30 people max. Most were uniformed, all armed. None had that rattled civilian look. These weren't evacuees. These were the ones still holding the line. Barely. Abigail led us into a smaller room partitioned by hanging tarps and old camo netting. Inside was a cot, a field desk, and a wall of hand-sketched maps and notes. She dropped a binder onto the table and flipped it open to the latest page, a logbook dated the day before. Intel confirms what we feared. The infection didn't start in Atlanta. It didn't start in Savannah either. The origin point is unknown, but we have indications of early cases reported along obscure freight lines, truck stop clinics, and even offshore vessels. It's not just a city contagion. It moves with people, always has. I leaned over and flipped a few pages back. Lists of sites, dates, medical notations, bioresponse codes. Some were scratched out entirely. Any idea how far it spread? I asked. We've confirmed dead zones up through Virginia and parts of eastern Kentucky. Ohio's command relay went dark 2 nights ago. Last solid report said there were riots, then silence. Satellite confirms loss of heat signatures over populated zones. We estimate total functional collapse of federal response within 10 to 14 days. West Coast? Still holding, barely. Some parts of Texas have stabilized. Pockets of resistance are organized, mostly former Guard units and militia with real logistics experience. But it's scattered. Communication is breaking down faster than the defenses. And the infected? I asked. She paused. They don't change. Not really. Slow, mindless. But we've seen some behavior that doesn't fit. Such as grouping, traveling long distances without a clear trail, moving against wind direction. A few incidents of coordinated aggression. No speech, no tactics, but patterns, enough to suggest something underlying, like they're all moving towards something. I didn't like the sound of that. You think they're being pulled? Not by a signal, but by instinct, or some central logic we haven't decoded yet. She turned toward Kaylee then, who was sitting on the cot, holding the worn plush rabbit we'd found back at her grandparents' house. Abigail's eyes softened. I want her off the roster. No patrols, no drills. She stays here, with you. I can assign you to logistics or local recon only. We've got people scavenging from 3 directions. We need skills, but we won't break families up again. Not anymore. I nodded. That night, we slept for the first time in days, without the sound of the wind moving wrong through the trees, without the metallic scent of blood creeping up through the floorboards, without tripwires and blackout blankets and lookout shifts. We were still underground, still surrounded by a dying world, still running on backup generators and spreadsheets full of red, but we were together, and for a while, that counted for something. The next morning, I met the team. 2 former MPs, a retired civil engineer, and a young lieutenant with the kind of stare you only get when you've watched your whole unit disappear and come back wrong. We discussed routes, fuel caches, quiet crossings. We talked about the outer settlements, pockets of survivors in farmhouses, and hollowed-out grocery stores. I offered to run a contact route, drop off supplies, take pulse counts, and return. It would keep us informed without overexposing the bunker's location. Abigail approved the plan. She gave me a small radio unit with strict transmission intervals. I left at dawn, returned by dusk. Never 2 days in a row, never the same route twice. Kaylee stayed behind. She helped in the grow room, learned to calibrate pH strips, harvest watercress. I came back once to find her writing something in a small notebook, drawing pictures of the roads we'd driven, labeling bridges, counting the birds she saw from the vent shaft. She'd started smiling again, just barely. On the 4th week, one of our scouts didn't return. A 3-man patrol went out to check. They didn't come back either. We found their vehicle 5 days later, stripped, blood inside but no bodies. The keys were still in the ignition. Abigail ordered the fallback corridor locked down. No more rescues. No more routes in or out without clearance. She didn't sleep much after that. I could see the weight settling into her face. Still, we held. The infected never found us, not directly. A few wandered close, maybe drawn by heat signatures or noise. But we put them down quietly. The rules remained. No fire, no loud engines, no open flames above ground. We had scrubbers now, better power storage. Someone even figured out how to rig a small hydro setup with an old drum and a downhill stream. And so it went. Not survival, not exactly. Endurance. Kaylee turned 11 inside that bunker. Abigail carved her a cake out of dried fruit and protein bars. lit a candle made from twisted wax paper and a match head. We sang, softly. She smiled. Not big, but real. I don't know what's coming next. No one does. There were no superheroes, no chosen ones. Just a man who didn't leave his daughter behind, a woman who didn't break under pressure, and a child who never stopped learning. We didn't save the world. We just kept going. And for now, that's enough. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.